the dominant narrative, or the traditional narrative, if you like, of the Danes cast is that there was up to the 3rd or 4th century AD, there was a large over kingdom of Ulster, and then with the rise of the Argila and what would now be mostly geographically Armagh, that there's that the ancient kings of Ulster who resided at Navan were pushed back into County Down, and there was a new shrunken Ullad, if you like, formed with mostly just Antrim and Down, and the kings of that new Ullad, that new reduced Ullad, became established at Downpatrick, with Downpatrick as their capital, and later on they called themselves the Dalfiatach was the name that they used. Now, there is, even in some early medieval documents, a certain amount of skepticism about this account. Certain people suggest that some of the things in the Ulster cycle, some of the stories in the Ulster cycle myths maybe exaggerated even back then in the early Middle Ages, and there maybe was a suggestion that the kings of Ulster had bigged up, if you like, their history to really more to emphasise their aspirations and their ambitions, maybe more than their past, but it's very difficult to say. So many people have considered that the Danes cast reflects the new boundary of that shrunken Ulster, that in the same manner that earthworks like the Black Pig's Dyke had framed southern Ulster, that this was a new sort of Black Pig's Dyke-like earthwork constructed in broken form on the high ground, if you like, along the Antrim and Down, or Armagh, and Down border. Now, of course, the Danes cast tends not to go through the low ground. Yeah. It only tends really to exist on the high ground, and you can see that really clearly actually when you use that like this. Our primary objective is to get dating evidence for the Danes cast. Yeah. Currently, we are making the assumption that the Danes cast, if the traditional narratives of the history of Ulster are correct, the Danes cast must date to 400 AD or 500 AD or something like that. But of course, it's quite possible that the Danes cast is indeed older. It does share a lot of morphological similarity to those older earthworks that I mentioned a minute ago, like the Black Pig's Dyke, and it may well be that this is an Iron Age earthwork. If it is an Iron Age earthwork, it probably suggests that we need to do some thinking about those traditional narratives of the scale of ancient Ulster, and that maybe the sort of West Ulster, East Ulster sort of split that we saw in the early medieval period maybe has earlier origins than that, and maybe there always was some sort of significant boundary on the Armagh Down sort of border, or at least maybe for a few centuries prior to the early medieval period. But time will tell. We have so far managed to excavate part of, hopefully most of, one of the ditches that we've encountered. We've actually encountered 2 ditches and 2 banks and a series of post holes and stake holes, and maybe we're hopeful of a palisade. We've got lots of material that we can radiocarbon date from the post holes. We've got material that we can radiocarbon date from, we hope, the palisade, and we are getting material which is suitable for radiocarbon dating from the strata as we're going down in the easterly ditch, the first one that we've encountered, and we're hoping to encounter the westerly ditch. Yeah. Never added to the scheduled list, and I'm not sure why that is. I think it was it may just have been missed when the Archaeological Survey of County Down was done in the 1960s.
So what do you reckon it ran, Cormac? What do you reckon is the line of it?
Right, basically it follows pretty closely the modern line of the Newry Canal.
Oh.
And so, and actually I could send you a screenshot or a GIF of a GIS plot. That's those graphical information systems. A GIS plot of the extent bits of the Danes cast.
Right.
Where it runs really from Scarva to Mean.
Yeah.
In broken sort of little broken pieces, right down from there right down to, well, just north of Newry and cross it. There's accounts that, and there are surviving bits, it seems, as well, crossing over towards Camloch and then curving right round again a bit towards Newry. So it doesn't entirely follow just exactly the county boundary, but it pretty much does.
Local reports are that, you know where the guy used to have the fishery, John O'Hare, there? Just
I don't know.
For George Pass, he's
yes, I know.
Was it Drumbanagher Church?
Yeah, kind of opposite Drumbanagher Church.
Yes.
He had a
here, right, where we dug a narrow section through, and if you can follow that dropping off soil level, right, that is the ditch edge. We still haven't got all the fills out of it. We think we've got the bottom of it over there. It's unfortunately the water's filled up and we're just in the process of starting to bale it. But we think we have the ditch edge going down there. We're hoping at this stage, because we have something that looks quite like subsoil, that it's a relatively shallow ditch, that it's flattening out and it's rising up on that side. And then we have the second bank material. We have some residual bank material, and then we have the ditch. This that we haven't really very much gone into this yet. We have the second ditch below us, but we have taken a little bit out, and we're nowhere near subsoil. We have to find subsoil here. We have to look for subsoil, and the subsoil will indicate, if you like, the drop off in the ditch. So it's a little bit hard to read at present because it's still partial. It's still well. This ditch is almost entirely still full, and this ditch has only been partially excavated. But we can see where there is a cut, a very distinct cut into the subsoil, which is starting to rise up on the other side and making a characteristic sort of flattened U shape.
So you weren't expecting two ditches, were you?
Well, we wondered. We didn't know there would be two ditches. We wondered would there be two ditches. We saw that there were two banks. We could see that in the ground, and a single ditch between them. Some people have discussed in the past the fact that the Danes Cast seems to have two banks either side of a ditch. This has been talked about some stretches of the Black Pig Stake as well. I think what probably is the case in most of those is that the outer ditch is smaller or more fully filled in. Yeah. Soil creep and the rest of it has tended to obscure the second ditch more. So people have made this assumption that there's one deep excavation and two ramparts derived AD as opposed to a 1st or 2nd century BC sort of archaeological layer. Even if we had artifacts, which we don't really, the sort of things you'd be finding would be iron objects and bronze objects, which potentially don't have a huge amount of change over those centuries. If we were talking about, say, the 700s, and that ring fort up there was 700s, we might start to get some ceramics. So if it was after the Battle of Moira, if it isn't Moira, the retreat.
It most definitely isn't Moira.
The retreat of the East Ulster, if you like, happens, or the retreat from West Ulster happens, then you would probably expect from that ring fort stuff to have fallen in, like coarse ceramics and stuff like that. But for some reason, the Iron Age and Late Bronze Age, they don't use ceramics very much at all. They tend to prefer wooden or bronze dining vessels. So, it'd be very hard from an artifactual point of view to have a sort of a chronological artifact marker if we did have artifacts that would tell us if this is Iron Age or if it was early medieval. So we're really dependent on our radiocarbon dates. But we have, thankfully, got quite a lot of material for radiocarbon dating. In terms of the form of these, I mean, it looks very like a linear earthwork from the Iron Age. But how many ways are there to build a linear earthwork? At the end of the day, you've got a bank and ditch, and maybe a palisade that runs, for a few kilometres in different stretches here and there. And I mean, there are definitely early medieval linear earthworks in Britain and Scandinavia and other places. So, it's by no means, I don't think we can say yet really for sure whether we're dealing with an Iron Age earthwork or if we're dealing with an early medieval earthwork. But what we can say is that if it turns out to be early medieval, it sort of gives some support to the traditional narrative that Jonathan has so eruditely sort of given us. If it suggests that this is a 1st century AD or 1st century BC or 2nd century BC construction or even earlier, then it sort of undermines this idea that there was not necessarily a unitary kingdom, but shall we say at least a confederation, a wider confederation of Ulster, of which the ancestors of the Daltheatach, or maybe even the ancestors of the Ikakobo, whichever are the true Ulstermen, were the kings of, or the over kings at least of. So it undermines that if it turns out to be Iron Age. I think that's probably as much as we can say right now.
How long will it be before you know from your carbon dating?
Well, we'll process these as soon as we get back to Queen's. We'll fast track processing these samples, and we would hope to have material ready to go to the radiocarbon lab within a couple of weeks. So we'd hope of leaving the fields. Then it's possible to have a radiocarbon date back in 2 or 3 months. The radiocarbon lab is very busy, and the last dates we submitted, they said would be 5 months before we had the answer. So at worst case scenario, I would hope we would have a date in about 6 months after the end of the excavation. But we could have one in 3 months after the end of the excavation.
What's your time frame, Cormac, here?
We have this week and we have next week. We'll not dig the entirety of it. We will dig a section, as we're doing, along one side of both of these. We will get a little bit of mechanical assistance tomorrow. We're going to have to extend this one very slightly. We used the machine to take the topsoil off for us. We have a machine coming in tomorrow to extend this trench another few meters. When we think we're bottoming it over there, but we're debating as to whether the layer that we've got is definite subsoil. And underneath it, when we dug the slightly deeper bit on the right hand side, we found that there was a blue clay, quite waterlogged blue clay under it. And we might get, if we finished and recorded everything, we might get the mechanical excavator to check that waterlogged blue clay and just ensure that it actually is the natural subsoil rather than some fairly inorganic material that built up in the ditch. That would be our last thing, and hopefully it won't, because if it is, then it could be that this is a much deeper excavation. We're going to have Roy has very kindly lent us a pump, so we'll if we do end up going much deeper, and if we do end up with 3 or 4 feet of water in it, that pump could be quite literally a lifesaver. Where we have cut a little slot down the side of our excavation.
Yes.
Where that slot is dropping down there to that plastic bag, that is the original ditch face. That is cut into very firm subsoil. We then think, or maybe it's hope, that it is levelling off to become a fairly shallow U-shaped ditch, taking advantage of the slope of the ground to be for the U-cut to be slightly higher on one side than the other. That is kind of our hope at present. We haven't firmly established, but if the material, if you see the little slightly water-filled bit on the left-hand side, that's not very deep. That's only a few inches deep. Our task for this morning is to establish if the material that is essentially a puddle at present is the same material as the hard subsoil that we were cutting into yesterday. We think it is, because before we filled this up yesterday we were looking at it, but we want to firmly establish that. But we will use probably we will take a final, before we close up the excavation, we will take a final test excavation down into this subsoil, just to assure ourselves that we're not in some unusually compacted redeposited material. But we can tell up there, you can actually see it very clearly, and the other archaeological features are cut into that sort of orangey, gravelly, hard till.
Yeah. But the stones have been added.
Those stones are actually probably, we think, and we'll ascertain this with certainty in the next day or two, but there are 2 deposits of stone here, and you can actually see them if you come round here a little bit easier. There are 2 deposits of stone. One deposit is just simply a shore or a drainage ditch, which was dug into the field to transmit water in that direction. But then you can probably see beneath that shore there's a sort of yellow clay layer.
Yep.
And that yellow clay layer has almost certainly collapsed from the bank. And then under that there are some large stones. And what we think probably has happened there is the bank has almost certainly been faced with stone.
Right.
And some bits of the Black Pigsty, or sorry, the Danes Cast, you can clearly see there is still stone facing on it.
Yeah.
Likely's happened is that the stone facing has collapsed in, and this is some of the bank material which has collapsed on top of it. And the other yellow clay layers which you see in the cross section face out here are actually, and you see the difference between the grey topsoil and then the sort of more yellow material, and then there's a black band, and then there's a more grey material. These are the yellow material is almost certainly the bank which was pushed in here probably in the 19th century at the time of the construction of the railway. And the grey material that you see is probably the fill that was at the base of or one of the fills at the base of the Danes Cast before
did you say
the bank material.
Did you say you found some posts as well?
We found some posts up here. Unfortunately, we rather don't see in this light. You can see actually one for mine. Where's you're just there. There's where the shadow of your knees are. There's a post there. In fact, if you move it, if you probably move slightly one side, you might see it better. Post there. It looks shallow. It is shallow, but that's probably because it's been truncated. It would have to have been deeper than that. Here we have a gully, which you can sort of see it's dark against the orangey natural subsoil on either side. We're still a wee bit undecided as to what this is. It may well itself be a drainage ditch, but it also has a little bit of a look of a stone of a palisade which has been packed with stones. So this could actually be maybe a series of revetting posts to retain the ditch, to stop it spreading. So you've stone facing on one side and a wooden palisade on the back of it, sort of together, making a nice sort of contained and nicely shaped and rampart, which isn't easily going to spread and certainly can lose its integrity. And then we also have a few other quite shallow post holes and stake holes, obviously with a certain amount of truncation with the ploughing one thing over the years, but they're real okay. They do contain a distinct charcoal rich fill. You can probably see a little sort of slot there. There's still not completely excavated, just partially excavated, and a tiny little post hole beyond it, and then another post hole sort of straight in a line from it, all quite shallow, and a scatter of little stake holes up here. And we have radiocarbon datable material from all of these features, so we will be able to get a chronology. These may well be contemporary with the Danes Cast. Somebody may have had some sort of little hut or a structure or something at the back of the cast, or they could be later, or even for that matter, they could be earlier. There's not really any way of saying at this stage. All we can say is we found very few artefacts. We found a couple of pieces of struck flint, which is interesting because this isn't really a flint-rich area. We haven't found any ceramics, which kind of does point us towards the Iron Age or the early part of the early Middle Ages. It's something that has been a point of debate amongst archaeologists for quite a long time now, is that we have a long ceramic history in Ireland and also in Britain right back from about 4000 BC, but for some reason in Ireland and in a lot of Scotland too, most of Scotland, the pottery use seems to have ceased, at least for domestic purposes, around 700 or 800 BC and didn't start again until about 780. We don't know why that is, we just know it happens. They seem to replace domestic potting. They still use pots for crucibles and things like that, ceramics for industrial purposes, but they seem to stop cooking and eating with ceramics for a period of over 1,000 years in Ireland and most of Scotland. And so we haven't found any ceramics. So that does maybe indicate that we're most likely to be dealing with Iron Age or very early medieval archaeology.
Cormac, thank you very much. I better let you get back to your work.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's great. It's such a good site, and it's a pleasure to talk about it. And there is kind of something here to see, although it's a wee bit confusing, and the light's quite low, so it's hard to look at. But yeah, we very much enjoyed talking to you this morning.
Thank you.